The courtroom smells like old wood and older money. I can feel my lawyer's hand on my shoulder, but I don't need it. I haven't needed anything from anyone in 3 months. The judge is reading the document. My stepmother sits 2 rows back, her manicured fingers wrapped around a designer purse. My father won't look at me. He's staring at his own lawyer's briefcase like it might contain the answers to questions he stopped asking a long time ago. "Ms. Chen," the judge says, looking over her glasses at me, "the evidence you've presented is substantial." I nod slowly, just a nod, nothing more. That's the moment everything changes. But of course, the moment it really changed was 3 months ago at Thanksgiving dinner. Part 1, the hook. I remember my hands shaking as I set down the gravy boat. It was homemade. The recipe my mother taught me, the one my father had always pretended to hate until my mother died, and then suddenly he couldn't stop talking about how it was the only gravy that ever tasted right. My stepmother, Catherine, was already seated at the head of the table, not the foot where guests usually sat, the head. She had her phone next to her plate, which should have been my first clue. Catherine never used her phone at the table. She always said it was pedestrian. But that day, it was right there, facing her, screen dark but present, a warning I didn't read. My father came down the stairs in his good sweater, the cashmere one my mother bought him 15 years ago. He'd gained weight. I noticed that immediately. His face was softer, less defined, like the architecture of him was slowly being erased. He sat down slowly. My younger brother Marcus was already eating. He did that, just started in on the turkey before anyone was ready, before we'd even done the thing where we said what we were grateful for. Marcus was 22 and worked in cryptocurrency, whatever that meant. He talked about it constantly, but I still didn't understand it. I think that was intentional. "Good timing," my father said. It was an odd way to start dinner. Catherine smiled. It was the kind of smile that isn't kind. I didn't sit yet. I was still fussing with the table, straightening napkins that didn't need straightening, adjusting the salt and pepper shakers so they were equidistant from the centerpiece. Buying time. I always do this when I'm nervous, and something in my body already knew to be nervous, even though I didn't yet have the facts. My father cleared his throat. "I've called everyone here because I need to tell you something," he said, "about the business." The business, 43 years old. My grandfather had started it. My father had built it. I had watched it become the thing that mattered more than anything, more than my mother, more than family dinners, more than the promises he made. I sat down. "We're selling," he said. The fork fell out of Marcus's hand. He was good at drama, my brother. Everything was a performance with him, but this felt real. "What do you mean selling?" I asked. My father's eyes moved to Catherine. Hers stayed on her phone. "I mean we're selling the business. All of it. Everything. The company, the properties, the assets, everything." My chest tightened. "When?" "Already started the process. Should be finalized in the new year." I set down my fork, slowly, carefully, like I was diffusing something. "Why didn't you tell us before now?" I asked. "Because I didn't need permission," my father said. It came out sharp. "It's my business." "It's the family business," I said. "I work there." "I know where you work," he said. The conversation wasn't moving the way conversations normally move. It was stilted, rehearsed. Like he'd practiced this, and it wasn't going exactly to script. "I had plans," I heard myself say. "Plans for the company, development strategy for the new division. I've been working on it for 6 months." "Plans change," Catherine said. She still hadn't looked up from her phone. That's when I felt it. The thing that lives in my stomach, the thing that only comes when you're about to lose something you didn't know you were already losing. "What happens to my inheritance?" I asked. "Not what happens to me. What happens to the money my mother left in trust, the money that was supposed to be distributed through the business, the money that was supposed to be my future?" My father didn't answer. "Dad, what happens to the money?" He took a long drink of wine. The glass was already half empty, and he'd only sat down 5 minutes ago. Catherine and I have been discussing the future, he said, and we've decided that when the business sells, the proceeds go to us, to the new household, to our life together. Marcus actually laughed. It was a confused, wrong sound. You can't do that, he said. I can, my father said. It's my company. The sale is part of my assets. You're adults. You need to learn to take care of yourselves. I didn't breathe for what felt like a very long time. What about Mom's trust? I asked quietly. Catherine convinced me to liquidate it early, he said. It was the most honest thing he'd said all day. It's already done. The funds were transferred to our account this morning. I watched him say this. I watched his hands stay steady. I watched him not meet my eyes. How much are we talking about? I asked. My voice sounded far away. Approximately 4.2 million from your mother's trust, he said, plus another 6 from the sale of the company. Catherine and I have some exciting investment opportunities we're exploring. I did the math. I've always been good at math. $12.2 million that was supposed to be my safety net, my future, my mother's last gift to me, was now gone. You had no right, I said. I'm your father, he said. I have every right. I had every right to my marriage, to my life, to my company, and to what comes from it. You're an adult, Sophie. You're 31 years old. You need to figure out how to stand on your own 2 feet. Catherine finally looked up from her phone. She smiled at me. It was the smile of someone who had already won. That's when I left the table. That's when I walked to the kitchen. That's when I did something I've never done before. I started to pay attention. Part 2, her normal life. But before that moment, before that Thanksgiving dinner that changed everything, I want you to know who I was. I grew up in a house that was always about money, not obviously. My parents were too refined for that. They never talked about money directly. They just made decisions based on it. My mother's garden was designed by a landscape architect who charged $300 an hour. My father's office had a view that cost more than most people's cars. I went to private school. I learned piano. I traveled. But I also learned something else. I learned that security is an illusion. My mother was diagnosed with cancer when I was 28. Ovarian cancer. The kind that moves fast, the kind that doesn't ask permission. She died 8 months later. It wasn't a slow decline. It was a collapse. One day she was here. The next day she was gone. During that time, I watched my father fall apart. And then I watched him reconstruct himself. He started spending more time at the office. He started mentioning a colleague named Catherine. He started coming home later and staying at the office earlier, until eventually he wasn't really coming home at all. 3 months after my mother's funeral, he told me he'd started dating Catherine. She was 14 years younger than him. She worked as an events coordinator for a company that I later learned was a front for something shadier, but I never figured out exactly what. Within 6 months, they were engaged. I didn't stop it. I didn't have the strength to stop it. I was still grieving, still falling into the holes my mother's absence had created. I went to work. I did my job. I came home to an empty apartment and tried to figure out how to be a person without her. My job was VP of Operations at Chen Holdings, the family business. I'd worked my way up from the ground floor, literally. At 16, I was filing documents in the basement. By 21, I was managing inventory. At 25, I was managing entire departments. At 30, I was running the show alongside my father. I loved that business. I loved it in a way I didn't love many things. It was logical, predictable, controllable. I understood the systems. I could make them work. I could make things better. The company sold commercial real estate development. We found properties that no one else wanted, bought them cheap, and turned them into something valuable. It was clean work. Honest work. My grandfather had started it. My father had made it profitable. I was supposed to make it great. After my mother died, I threw myself into it completely. I came in at 7 in the morning and left at 7 at night. I had a system for everything. I kept spreadsheets. I tracked every expense. I knew every tenant, every lease, every contract. My father used to joke about it. Sophie can tell you the square footage and tax history of every building we own, he'd say. She dreams in zoning codes. I didn't mind the joke. It was true. But what I'm trying to tell you is that I was trusting. I trusted my father would be responsible. I trusted the business was secure. I trusted that my mother's money was sitting safely in trust, growing quietly, waiting for me. I trusted too much. I also lived simply, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I rented an apartment in a nice part of the city, but I didn't try to impress anyone. I drove a 2015 Honda Civic. I shopped at regular grocery stores. My clothes were nice but not expensive. I had about $80,000 in my personal savings account. Which meant, when my father told me at that Thanksgiving table that I was getting nothing, I didn't have a backup plan. That was the thing no one tells you about losing money like that. It's not the money you notice at first. It's the vulnerability. My lawyer later told me that my mother's trust should have been protected, that there were legal mechanisms that should have prevented my father from liquidating it without my consent. But he was the executor, and I had been naive enough to think that meant he would execute it responsibly. I was naive about a lot of things, it turned out. My best friend Jenny was the first person I called after I left the house that night. She worked in financial services, which meant she knew things. "He did what?" she said. "He sold the company and he's keeping all the money, and he liquidated my trust." There was a long silence on the other end of the phone. "That's not legal," she said finally. "He said it is." "Can he do that, liquidate a trust?" "Apparently, yes, if he's the executor and if he was the one who funded it." "Oh my God," Jenny said. "Oh my God, Sophie." I was driving. I had just gotten in my car and started moving because I couldn't sit in that house anymore. I couldn't watch Catherine's smile widen. I couldn't watch my father not look at me. I couldn't be there. "What do you do?" Jenny asked. "I don't know," I said. "I'm going to talk to a lawyer." "A good lawyer, the best lawyer." "With what money?" "Your savings." "My savings won't be enough if he contests anything." "Then we'll figure it out," Jenny said. "Come over, don't go home, come to my place." I went to Jenny's place. That night I sat on her couch and I cried, really cried. The kind of crying that comes from your bones, the kind that makes your whole body shake. Jenny held my hand. "I trusted him," I said over and over. "He's my father, he's supposed to protect me." "I know," Jenny said. "I know, baby, I know." But knowing doesn't fix anything. Part 3. The betrayal. What happened over the next 2 weeks was a kind of slow-motion destruction that I wouldn't understand until much later. My father called me once, the day after Thanksgiving. "Sophie," he said, "I know you're upset." "I'm not upset," I said. I wasn't crying anymore. I was past crying. "I'm devastated, there's a difference." "I understand you feel betrayed." "I don't feel anything," I lied. "I'm trying to figure out what my legal options are." There was a pause. "You want to see your own father?" "I want to know if I have grounds to." Another pause, longer this time. "Your mother wanted you to be strong," he said. "Independent. If you inherited everything, if I just handed you money, you'd never learn what it means to work for something." "I work," I said quietly. "I work at your company. I work every single day." "Worked," he said. "Sophie, I'm going to need you to resign, effective immediately. Catherine is restructuring the executive team, and there are going to be some changes." I didn't say anything. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" "You're firing me." "You're my daughter. I'm not firing you, but the dynamics have changed. Catherine thinks it would be better if you weren't working there during the transition. Too many conflicts of interest, too many family complications." Catherine thinks. That was the moment I started to see the structure of what was happening. This wasn't my father acting alone. This was orchestrated. Catherine had planned this. She had positioned herself, developed her influence, and then moved. And my father had let her. "I'll need a settlement," I said. "We can discuss that," he said. "But Sophie, understand that I'm trying to be generous here. I'm trying to give you a fresh start. If you push back on this, if you make this difficult, then we're going to have problems." It was a threat, delivered kindly in his normal voice, but it was absolutely a threat. "I understand," I said. I hung up. I called my brother Marcus that night. "Did he fire you?" Marcus asked. "How do you know that?" "Because he called me too. He wants me to come work for the company full-time. Real job this time, not the crypto stuff. He's offering me a 6-figure salary and stock options." I felt something shift inside my chest, something cold. "Are you going to do it?" "Of course I'm doing it," Marcus said. "Are you kidding? It's free money." "It's not free money," I said. "He's buying your loyalty." "So what?" Marcus said. "At least he's buying it. He's not buying it from you, and you're upset about that." "That's not fair." "None of it's fair," Marcus said. "But you're the one who had to be so smart and independent and prove you could do everything yourself. He respects that. So now you're on your own. That's what you wanted, isn't it?" I didn't answer. "Look," Marcus said, softer now. "I'm sorry he's being like this, but I can't turn down money because you're mad at him. I have my own life." "I know," I said. "Don't make me choose." "I'm not making you choose." But I was, and he was choosing him. Over the next week, the pieces began to reveal themselves. I found out through a colleague that Catherine had convinced my father to hire a new VP of operations. She'd been recommending candidates for weeks, apparently. This was planned before Thanksgiving. The decision was made before he even told me he was selling the company. I found out through another colleague that there had been rumors about financial irregularities in the company for months. Nothing concrete, nothing that had been reported, but whispers. Discrepancies in the books. Accounts that didn't match. When I started looking back through my records, I found them. Small transfers, thousands of dollars here and there, moving between accounts, nothing obvious, nothing that would have triggered an audit. But definitely there. I called my father's accountant, Derek, who I'd known for 15 years. "Derek," I said, "I need to ask you about some transactions." "I can't discuss company finances with you," he said carefully. "You know that." "Derek, it's me. What's going on with those transfers?" There was a long silence on the phone. "Sophie, I think you should talk to your father about that." "I'm asking you." Another silence. "I've been asked to not discuss details with you," he said finally. "I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, but it's a condition of my employment." I hung up. That was when I started to understand something. They were hiding something, not just stealing my inheritance, something else. Something bigger. I went back through every document I could access. I was still technically employed until the end of the month, so I still had system access. I printed everything that seemed even slightly irregular. I filled 3 folders. By the second week of December, I had a timeline of movements. Small thefts starting about 18 months ago, around the time Catherine came into the picture. The total came to approximately $1.2 million. My father wasn't just taking my inheritance. He was stealing from the company, which meant he was stealing from investors, which meant he was committing fraud. And when the company sold, that fraud would be buried. That was Catherine's plan. That was what she'd orchestrated. Get rid of me, the person who actually paid attention to the numbers. Fire me before the sale. Position herself in the company to access the accounts. Make sure there was no one left who understood the business well enough to notice the holes. And my father had helped her do it. I sat at my kitchen table at 11 p.m. on December 12th, surrounded by documents and printouts, and I made a decision. I was going to destroy them both. Not violently, not criminally, but completely. I was going to take everything they'd done, and I was going to show the world. Part 4, Pressure and Humiliation. But first, I had to survive the gaslighting. That's what I call this period now, the gaslighting period, December 12th through December 27th. My father reached out again, a text this time. "Catherine and I would like to meet with you. We're hoping to find a resolution." I agreed. Of course I agreed. We met at a restaurant, a nice one, the kind where they know my father's name. Catherine wore designer sunglasses even though we were inside. "We've been very concerned about you," my father said immediately. It was his opening move. Concern, reframing the narrative as being about me, about my well-being, not about what he'd done. "I'm fine," I said. "You don't look fine," Catherine said. "You look thin. Are you sleeping?" It was a calculated move. She was establishing that I was unstable, that I was unwell, that my perception of reality might be compromised. I smiled. "I'm sleeping fine. I'm eating fine. I'm just processing what happened." "What we're trying to explain," my father said, "is that we understand this is difficult. It's a major change, but the world doesn't owe you anything. Your mother understood that. That's why she wanted you to be independent." "Is that what she told you?" I asked. "It's what I know," he said. "You're trying to make this about money, but really it's about whether you can handle adversity. This is adversity. This is the moment you find out who you really are." "I know who I am," I said, "and I know what you did with the accounts." My father and Catherine exchanged a look, just a look, 1 second, but I saw it. "Fear." "I don't know what you're talking about," my father said. "The transfers," I said. "Starting in June of last year, nearly $1.2 million moved between company accounts in ways that don't match any legitimate business expense." My father put down his fork. "You don't have authority to review those transactions," he said. "Maybe not legally, but I still saw them." "Saw is not the same as understood," Catherine said. It was the first time she'd really engaged with me directly. "There are legitimate business reasons for those transfers, complex financial management that someone in operations wouldn't necessarily understand." "I understand money," I said. "I understand business. I understand fraud." "That's a serious accusation," my father said. His voice was very calm now, too calm. "Yes," I said, "it is." "Based on what?" Catherine asked. "A few transfers you don't understand. Sophie, that sounds like paranoia. That sounds like someone who's upset about losing money and is creating narratives to explain it away." "It's not a narrative." "Isn't it?" my father said. "You lose your inheritance and suddenly you find evidence of crimes in documents you don't have authority to access. That sounds desperate to me. That sounds like someone grasping at straws." I felt my certainty start to waver. That's what they were doing. That's what gaslighting is. It's making you question your own perception. But I didn't waver. "I'm going to take this to the authorities," I said. The noise from the restaurant seemed to get louder. Forks on plates, people laughing, the sound of normal life continuing around this moment that was supposed to be the end of something. My father picked up his wine glass and drank. When he set it down, his expression had changed. It was harder now, colder. "If you do that," he said, "I will make sure that no one ever hires you again. I have relationships with every major development company in this city. I will personally tell them that you're unstable, that you've been making unfounded accusations, that you stole company documents without authorization. By the time I'm done, your reputation will be destroyed." "He's right," Catherine said, "and I'll add a civil suit, defamation, theft of proprietary documents. The damages could be significant." "Your mother would be ashamed," my father said. It was the cruelest thing he could have said. Making wild accusations, trying to destroy her own father out of spite. I stood up. "I'm done," I said. "We can make this easy," Catherine said. "We were willing to give you a settlement, a reasonable amount to get you started, $200,000. That's generous given that you don't have any legal claim." $200,000, I repeated. "It's enough to cover your apartment for a while, get you through a transition," my father said. "We don't want to have to take legal action against you. We don't want this to get ugly." It was simultaneously a bribe and a threat. "I'll think about it," I said, even though I had no intention of thinking about it. "Think fast," Catherine said. "The offer expires on December 24th. I left the restaurant. That night I didn't sleep. I sat at my kitchen table and I thought about what they'd said, what they'd implied. I thought about how easy it would be to believe them, To think I was crazy, to accept the $200,000 and just try to move on. That's probably what most people would do. But I'm not most people. I'm the kind of person who pays attention. I'm the kind of person who keeps records. I'm the kind of person who prepares for the worst. And more importantly, I'm the kind of person who doesn't break. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Part 5, Silent Transformation. Her name was Rebecca Zhang, and she was the best corporate litigation attorney in the city. I found her because Jenny's husband had worked with her on a business deal, and he said she was a shark in a Hermes scarf. I met with her in her office. It was on the 42nd floor of a building in the financial district, and the view was worth more than I'd made in a year. "Tell me everything," Rebecca said. I did. I spent 3 hours in that office, and I told her every single thing, every conversation, every document, every transfer, every moment. She didn't interrupt once. When I was done, she leaned back in her chair and she looked at me. "Your father committed fraud," she said. "Against his investors, against the company, against you. Catherine is complicit. Whether she's legally culpable depends on her level of involvement, but based on what you've described, I'd say she had knowledge and possibly directed the activity." "Can we prove it?" "We have documents," she said. "But they're documents you accessed without authorization. They're not admissible as they are. We need to get legitimate access." "How?" "That's the tricky part," she said. "If we file suit, we tip our hand. They'll destroy evidence. They'll move money. They'll lawyer up and go into full protection mode." "So what do we do?" Rebecca pulled out a notebook. "We document everything," she said. "Every conversation, every message, every interaction. We build a case so solid that when we present it, they have nowhere to run." "How long?" "Could be months, could be longer." "I don't have months," I said. "I don't have a job, I don't have money." "You have the truth," Rebecca said. "That's worth something, and you have me. I'm going to take your case." "For how much?" "We'll discuss that later," she said. "First, let's see if this case even exists. First, let's see if we can prove what you're saying." "We can," I said. "I know we can." Rebecca smiled. It was a real smile, not a lawyer smile. "I believe you," she said. "And I like people who know they're right. Now, here's what we do." Over the next 2 weeks, I did what Rebecca told me to do. I documented everything. Every conversation became a carefully written summary, including date, time, location, and exact dialogue as I remembered it. I didn't add emotion. I didn't add interpretation, just facts. I contacted the company's auditor under the guise of a routine employee question and asked him to confirm accounting procedures. He was suspicious, but he answered. I documented his answers. I reached out to Derek, the accountant, and I asked him to coffee. He didn't want to meet with me, but I was persistent. We met at a cafe near his office, and I gently pressed him on the transfers. "I can't discuss this with you," he said again. "I know," I said. "I'm not asking you to, I'm just asking you to listen." I laid out what I'd found, carefully, neutrally, like I was presenting a puzzle to a friend, not an accusation. Derek's face went pale. "How long have you known about this?" he asked. "A few weeks." "Have you gone to anyone?" "No, not yet." He looked around to make sure no one was listening. "What happened was, your father asked me to restructure some accounts. He said it was for tax purposes. Catherine helped with the documents. I did what they asked because they're my clients and my boss, but I never felt right about it. Those transfers don't make sense from a tax perspective." "Thank you for telling me that," I said. "What are you going to do with this?" he asked. "I'm going to use it to make sure they don't hurt anyone else." Derek nodded slowly. "If you need me to testify," he said, "I'll do it. I can't lose my career over this, but I'll testify if you ask." "I won't ask you to risk anything," I said, "but I appreciate you telling me the truth." That was the moment I started to see the shape of what was coming. Around me, the world continued. Christmas came and went. It was the first Christmas without my mother. and my father and Catherine went to Cabo. They sent me a text, wishing me happy holidays. I received it while I was sitting alone in my apartment, eating takeout Chinese food, and I actually laughed. The audacity, the casual cruelty, the absolute certainty that they'd won. But they hadn't. I'd stopped being angry around December 20th. That was another turning point that no one saw. I was sitting at my kitchen table, drinking tea, looking at the documents spread out in front of me, and I realized that anger was useless. Anger is loud, anger is sloppy, anger loses cases. What I needed was cold clarity. What I needed was to think like the smartest person in the room. And for the first time in my life, I realized I might actually be that person. Not because I was smarter than my father. He was brilliant. He built a multi-million-dollar company from the ground up. But he had gotten comfortable. He had started to believe he was untouchable. And he had fallen in love with the wrong person, and that person had made him reckless. Catherine was smart, but she was greedy in a way that made her stupid. Greed makes people careless. They take shortcuts. They leave evidence. I could work with that. I could work with the fact that they were both convinced I was broken, devastated, powerless. I could work with their contempt. That's when the real planning began. Part 6, Secret Preparation. Rebecca and I met every week for 6 weeks. These meetings were usually at coffee shops, never at her office. She was careful about covering our tracks. If they realize you're working with me, she said, they'll respond. Right now, they think you're broken. We want to keep it that way. So I broke in public, and I built in private. In public, I was the devastated daughter. I posted sad quotes on Instagram. I lost weight, not on purpose. I just stopped eating regularly. I took a part-time job at a retail store that paid minimum wage, something my father might hear about through mutual acquaintances. I looked like I was drowning. In private, I was something else entirely. Rebecca had recommended a private investigator named Marcus, no relation to my brother, but the coincidence was useful. Marcus was a former cop with connections everywhere. He was expensive, but Rebecca had negotiated a rate for me. For $2,000 a month, Marcus would do 3 things. 1, he would track my father's financial movements. 2, he would surveil Catherine to understand her activities and her connections. 3, he would find anything in their histories that could be relevant to our case. What kind of things? I asked. Anything, Marcus said. He was a large man, probably late 50s, with the kind of face that had seen a lot of things. Old girlfriends, financial troubles, affairs, legal issues. You'd be surprised what comes up when you look hard enough. I'm looking for evidence of fraud, I said. Then that's what I'll find, he said. Over the next 5 weeks, Marcus did find things. A lot of things. He found that Catherine had been married before. 3 times, actually, to men who all reported mysteriously losing money after she left them. One of them had filed a civil suit alleging fraud, but the suit was settled confidentially. The details were sealed. He found that Catherine had a history of debt, credit card debt, student loans she'd defaulted on, evictions. She was a con artist, basically, a professional one. He found that she'd changed her name in 2014. She was born Catherine Mitchell, but she'd been known as Catherine Sinclair, Catherine Brooks, and a half-dozen other variations. He found that she had investment accounts in the Cayman Islands, and in the British Virgin Islands, and in Liechtenstein. He found that the events coordinator job she'd had before meeting my father had actually been a cover. She'd been working as a personal assistant to a wealthy real estate developer who'd ultimately pressed charges against her for theft. Those charges had been mysteriously dropped. This woman is a professional grifter, Marcus said, laying out a folder full of documents and photographs. She finds wealthy men, moves in, extracts assets, and moves on. Your father isn't her first victim. He's just her current one. Can we prove all this? I asked. In court, some of it. The marriage records are public. The civil suit exists, but the details are sealed. The name changes are on public record. The financial movements require a warrant to trace completely, but I have connections that can help. The Cayman Islands accounts, those are trickier. But if we get a forensic accountant and a good lawyer, we can subpoena the information as part of discovery. Rebecca was reading through everything carefully. This is good, she said, but it's complicated. It doesn't directly prove the fraud at the company. What it does prove is her motive and her pattern of behavior. How does that help? I asked. It helps in court, Rebecca said. It shows that Catherine didn't just happen to encourage your father to commit fraud. Fraud is her specialty. It's her career. This wasn't an impulsive decision. It was a calculated scheme by a woman with a documented history of defrauding people. What about my father? I asked. Rebecca was quiet for a moment. That's harder, she said. Legally, he's both the perpetrator and the person with authority to make financial decisions. But psychologically, he's been manipulated, influenced by a woman who is a professional manipulator. That's a mitigating factor, not an exonerating one, but it's something. Can we prosecute her separately? We can try, Rebecca said, but your father would have to testify against her, and based on everything you've told me, I don't think he's going to do that willingly. So she gets away with it. No, Rebecca said. She doesn't, because we're going to make it impossible for her to deny her involvement. And when everything comes out, your father is going to have to choose between protecting her and protecting himself. I'm going to bet he chooses himself. Over the next few weeks, I did something that Rebecca advised against. I maintained contact with my father. Not often, just occasionally. A text here and there. An email asking about health insurance information. Neutral, friendly, not accusatory. It served two purposes. One, it kept him thinking I was broken and moving on. Two, it kept him comfortable. A comfortable criminal is less likely to be extra careful about covering his tracks. By early February, Rebecca had enough. We can move forward, she said. I'm filing for discovery. When we do, they're going to know you're coming after them. What happens then? I asked. Then everything accelerates, she said. They're going to lawyer up. They're going to try to find a way out, and they're going to probably try to intimidate you into backing down. Let them try, I said. I'm serious, Rebecca said. Once we file, you need to be careful. Don't be alone in places where they could approach you. Don't accept any meetings with them or their lawyers without me present. Be aware of your surroundings. Your father might be harmless, but Catherine, she's not someone to underestimate. I don't underestimate her, I said. That's why I'm going to destroy her. Rebecca smiled. I think I'm starting to like you, she said. On February 15th, we filed the complaint. And then, like Rebecca said, everything accelerated. Part 7, the big twist. My father called me that afternoon, the moment he must have gotten the notice. His voice was different. All the softness was gone. This was the version of him I'd only seen in business meetings, the person who made people quake. What the hell are you doing? He asked. What needs to be done? I said. You're suing me, your own father. Do you understand what that means? Do you understand the legal costs? Do you understand that you're going to lose? I don't think I will. You have no case, he said. Those transfers are legitimate business expenses. Then you shouldn't be worried about discovery, I said. You should be welcoming it. He hung up. Catherine called me 20 minutes later. I just wanted you to know that I find what you're doing disgusting, she said. Your father took you in, he gave you a home, he gave you a job, and this is how you repay him, by making up stories. I'm not making up anything, I said. You are, she said. And when the court realizes that you fabricated these documents and these accusations, you're going to regret it. Slander and defamation carry significant penalties, Sophie. I'm prepared to pursue them to the fullest extent of the law. Sue me then, I said. I'd actually welcome that. Discovery in a defamation case would be very interesting. We could subpoena your financial records. We could subpoena your communication with my father. We could subpoena the documents from those other cases. The sealed ones. There was a moment of silence. What other cases? She asked carefully. The ones you settled with your ex-husbands, I said. The ones you've been trying to hide. The ones your lawyer made go away. How did you, she started. I hung up. That was Thursday. On Friday, I got a call from a lawyer I'd never heard of. He represented my father. Your client has made some very serious allegations, the lawyer said. His name was Richard Price, and he sounded like the kind of person who'd been doing this for 40 years. Serious and true, I said. We're prepared to offer a settlement, $2 million, enough to cover your legal fees and give you a fresh start. No, I said. You should talk to your attorney. I will, I said, but the answer will still be no. This is generous, Richard said. Your case is weak. You accessed documents without authorization. That's theft. Your evidence is circumstantial, and you have no witnesses. Actually, I said, I do. It was a bluff. Derek wasn't technically a witness to anything illegal, but it was enough to make them nervous. After I hung up, I called Rebecca. They offered $2 million, I said. That's good, Rebecca said. That means they're scared. That means they think we can win. Or they're just trying to shut me up. Same thing, Rebecca said. A scared person offers money. A confident person goes to trial. On Saturday, something strange happened. I got an email from a lawyer I'd never heard of, but the email wasn't from the lawyer. It was forwarded by someone at the company, an employee. The email was from someone named Thomas Chen, not my father, not anyone I knew, but the subject line said, Ray, company discrepancies, March 2023. The email detailed the transfers I'd found, but it also detailed others I hadn't found. Larger ones, older ones, going back further than 18 months. It detailed transfers dating back nearly 3 years. The total wasn't $1.2 million. It was $4.7 million. And there was something else. The email included documentation of secret meetings, conference call notes, emails between my father and Catherine planning the theft, planning the sale, planning to use the sale to launder the money. It was everything. It was the entire case, handed to me on a silver platter. I forwarded it to Rebecca with a message. Where did this come from? She called me back immediately. I don't know, she said, but don't reply to it, don't acknowledge it, don't contact anyone about it. Who is Thomas Chen? I'm looking into it, she said. Give me an hour. An hour later, she called back. Thomas Chen is a legitimate attorney, she said. He works for a firm in Toronto, but his message says he's forwarding something that was sent to him anonymously. He received a USB drive in the mail with no return address. When he opened it, he found this documentation and a note explaining that it was evidence of fraud related to a company sale. Who sent it? I asked. He doesn't know, but he thought it was the right thing to forward it to a lawyer. The email indicates he's concerned about fraud and wanted it to be investigated properly. It could be a trap, I said. It could be forged documentation meant to confuse the case. It could be, Rebecca agreed, but it's also real. I've had a forensic IT expert look at the metadata. The documents are real. They're authentic. They came from your father's email and Catherine's email. Someone with access to both their systems compiled them. Who would have that access? That, Rebecca said, is the interesting question. I thought about it. Who had access to my father's email, his assistant, the IT department, his business partners, the company accountants? Who had access to Catherine's email? My father. Their shared devices. Maybe her personal devices if she was synced to the company system. But who would have access to both, along with the technical knowledge to compile everything into a cohesive file and the motivation to send it anonymously? I ran through the possibilities in my head. And then I realized something. Marcus, the investigator, he'd said he had connections that could help with financial investigations. I thought he meant government connections, police connections. What if he meant something else? I called him. Marcus, I said, did you send that email? I don't know what you're talking about, he said immediately. Marcus. Sophie, if I were going to do something like that, I wouldn't tell you. That way you're protected. You have plausible deniability. You didn't know where it came from. You're just a victim who received documentation from an anonymous source. You did the right thing by reporting it to your lawyer. That's illegal, I said. Probably, Marcus said. But so is what your father did. So is what Catherine did. The question is what's more important, the rules or justice? Justice through the law. Sometimes the law needs a little help, Marcus said. Sometimes people who are smart enough to break the law are smart enough to cover it up. And then where's your justice? I didn't say anything. Your case just got a lot stronger, Marcus said. Your father is going to prison. Catherine is going to prison. And you're going to get your life back. That's justice. The rest is just details. He hung up. I sat with that for a long time. With the fact that someone had committed a crime to help me fight a crime. With the moral ambiguity of it all. But Rebecca was right about one thing. It didn't matter how the evidence got there. What mattered was that it was real. And it was more than enough. Part 8, Climax Confrontation. The trial started on April 3rd. I wore a gray suit, professional but not ostentatious. I had my hair down, which made me look younger and more sympathetic. Rebecca coached me on this. Everything in trial is strategy. The courtroom was exactly what I expected. Wooden panels, the smell of old money and older systems. The judge was a woman in her 60s, Judge Patricia Hernandez, and she had a reputation for not tolerating fraud. My father sat at the defense table with Richard Price. He looked smaller than I remembered him, diminished. There was a legal pad in front of him, and Richard kept leaning over to whisper things in his ear. Catherine wasn't there. She'd skipped town the day after Rebecca filed her deposition. Her lawyer argued that she was undergoing medical treatment in Switzerland and couldn't attend trial. Rebecca immediately filed a motion to compel her attendance, and the judge granted it. But Catherine never showed up, and by that point, it didn't matter. Because Rebecca had all the evidence she needed. The prosecution started with the basics, the transfers, the accounts, the money missing from the company. Rebecca walked through them slowly, deliberately, using documents and expert testimony to establish the timeline. Derek, the accountant, testified. He was nervous, but he was honest. He described how my father had asked him to move money, how Catherine had provided documentation, how it had never felt right, but he'd done it because my father was his boss. Did you believe these transfers were legitimate? Rebecca asked. No, Derek said, I did not. Why not? Because they didn't correspond to any actual business expense. They were moving money between accounts and then to external accounts. There was no clear purpose. The forensic accountant testified next. She was a woman named Dr. Sienna Williams, and she had Ph.D. in accounting and had worked on fraud cases for 20 years. In your professional opinion, Rebecca asked, are these transfers consistent with legitimate business operations? Absolutely not, Dr. Williams said. These transfers are consistent with deliberate theft and money laundering. The pattern is classical. Money is moved through multiple accounts to obscure its origin, then transferred to external accounts, likely offshore. This is a well-established fraud scheme. Could a reasonable person believe these transfers were legitimate? No, Dr. Williams said. Not if they were paying attention, not if they were doing their job. This was the beginning of my father's defense crumbling. Because Richard Price's entire strategy was to claim that the transfers were legitimate, that my father had simply restructured the company accounts for tax purposes, and that I was too unsophisticated to understand complex financial management. That narrative died when Dr. Williams testified. Then Rebecca presented the anonymous emails, the ones Marcus had sent or arranged to be sent, or whatever happened with those. The ones that detailed the planning of the fraud, the ones that showed my father and Catherine discussing how to extract maximum money from the sale. One email, dated October 2023, read, "Once the sale closes, we move the accounts to the BVI and let the company disappear. If anyone questions the transfers, we claim they were performance bonuses and investment opportunities. By then we'll be gone. Richard tried to argue that the emails were forged, that they were planted evidence. By whom? Rebecca asked. My client. She worked in operations, not it. She has no technical knowledge. She has no access to her father's email. Who would she work with to forge this evidence? Richard had no answer. The trial lasted 3 weeks. On the last day, my father took the stand. He looked like an old man that day, older than I'd ever seen him. He'd aged 10 years in the 4 months since Thanksgiving. Rebecca approached him carefully, deliberately, asking questions that established his ownership of the company, his knowledge of the transfers, his relationships with the people involved. Did you authorize the transfer of $400,000 to an offshore account on December 3rd, 2023? She asked. No, he said. Your signature is on the authorization. Catherine must have forged it. On all 47 occasions, that similar signatures appear on similar documents. He didn't answer. Mr. Chen, is it true that you were considering retirement before Catherine came into your life? Yes. And after Catherine came into your life, you decided to liquidate your daughter's trust and commit fraud. I didn't commit fraud. But Catherine convinced you to liquidate the trust. It was a decision I made. For what reason? To give us a fresh start. You needed $4.2 million for a fresh start. It's not as much as it seems. Rebecca smiled. It was not a kind smile. Let me ask you something, Mr. Chen. In all your years running your company, in all your years being a father and a businessman, did you ever once consider that what you were doing was wrong? My father looked at me. For the first time in months, he really looked at me, and I saw it in his eyes. He knew. He'd always known. Yes, he said quietly, I knew it was wrong. The courtroom went silent. I just didn't think I'd get caught. That was the moment the case ended. Not legally. There were still arguments and jury deliberations and legal procedures. But in the minds of everyone in that courtroom, including my father, the case was over. I won. Part 9, Revenge and Justice Payoff. The jury deliberated for 2 days. When they came back, the verdict was unanimous. Guilty of fraud, guilty of embezzlement, guilty of breach of fiduciary duty. Judge Hernandez sentenced my father to 5 years in prison. She made him pay restitution to the company and to me personally. She froze his assets pending civil suits. Catherine was tried in absentia, convicted, and her assets were seized by the court. Every account I could reach was frozen. The money in the Cayman Islands became the subject of an international investigation. She disappeared, probably to a country that didn't have an extradition treaty, probably to a new name and a new wealthy man. But she was done. Her career as a grifter was over. Every time she tried to build a new identity, there would be documentation of the previous ones. Every time she tried to disappear, there would be people looking for her. I got $3.1 million in restitution, which wasn't the full amount, but it covered my trust and then some. I got my inheritance back with interest. Marcus, my brother, had a harder time. When he realized what my father had done, when he understood that he'd been going to work for a criminal, he had what I can only describe as a breakdown. He quit the company. He moved to a different city. He stopped talking to me for almost a year. But eventually, he came back. Eventually, he realized that this wasn't about choosing sides. It was about doing what was right. And he did do what was right. The company was restructured. The sale was halted. The investors were protected. New leadership was brought in, and I was asked to come back as CEO. I said no. I said no because I didn't want to run the company anymore. I didn't want the thing I'd loved to be the thing that held me captive anymore. Instead, I used the money to start my own firm, a small company that did what I loved, finding broken properties and making them whole again. I called it Genesis Development. 3 years later, it was worth $15 million. 4 years later, it was worth $45 million. But the money was never really the point. The point was this. I came back from something that was supposed to destroy me, and I didn't just survive it, I thrived. Part 10, Quiet Ending. My father was released after serving 4 years with good behavior. I was prepared to feel something about that. Anger, maybe, relief, closure. But when I heard the news, I felt nothing. He was older now, broken in the way that prison breaks people. He'd lost his money, his company, his freedom, and his wife. Catherine had divorced him while he was in prison, taking whatever assets she could grab and disappearing to Paris. I heard through Marcus that Dad had applied to work at a grocery store, that he lived alone in a small apartment, that he'd joined a support group. I never contacted him. Sometimes I saw him in the way you see someone in a city where you both live. We'd be at a grocery store or a restaurant, and I'd catch his eye across the room. He'd look away first. He always looked away first. I didn't need anything from him, not anymore. The real victory wasn't the trial or the money or even the retribution. The real victory was what I learned about myself in the process. I learned that I was stronger than I thought. I learned that my brain was my best weapon. I learned that the person who seems broken is sometimes the person you should be most afraid of. And I learned this: the best revenge isn't dramatic, it's not loud, it's not showy. The best revenge is living well. It's building something from nothing. It's becoming successful. It's becoming the woman that, when people hear your name, they think not of tragedy, but of strength. That's what I became. That's who I am now. On the day I signed the papers to expand Genesis development into international markets, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just my name on the envelope, in handwriting I recognized. Inside was a check for $100,000. And a note that said, "I'm sorry, I can't give back what I took, but maybe this helps." I looked at that check for a long time. Then I shredded it, and I donated $100,000 to a women's domestic violence shelter. Because that's the kind of woman I am now. Not one who needs his apology. Not one who wants his money. One who's complete without him. And that, more than any courtroom victory, is what I was fighting for the whole time. To be whole again. To be myself. To be free.